was born in 1970 in a small town in Kenya. I was the second born in a family of 7 kids. Though for a long time it was just me and my brother Hannington. From the name Hannington, you can guess where I come from. We lived in a nice, small community, and we considered ourselves successful in those days. And the interesting thing is that my dad was a medical nurse, and my mother a primary school teacher. Now, my dad, we used to refer to him as belonging to the gentry of the exposed, because he was among the group of people in those days who had visited England and traveled through Europe. So we considered him to be very well exposed. My childhood was very happy until I became a teenager, and then some realities began to set in. The realities that revealed how much my father loved me and how much his love made me to be the good I am. I failed my primary school exams. Yes, I failed my end of primary school exams. It was very, very disappointing to me. It was very painful. My parents explained it to me as being an average performance, but I could see that the truth was that I had failed. What were the other parents talking about? How clever their kids were. And these kids were, there's that week when the calling letters start coming in. So they had calling letters from Alliance, from Lenana, from Nairobi School, even Jiri's High School. I waited, but my calling letter never came. What made it even more painful was that my brother had failed the year before. So I was starting a tradition here. So Dad decided that, repeating was not a good option, but I was quite suspicious of his decision. You see, in those days, if a child failed, you made him repeat, and then he would pass. So if you loved your child, you made him repeat. So in my view, my dad didn't love me because he said, now, he kind of gave up on me. So off I went to live with Dad in a faraway little farming town, and I got enrolled at Okeyo Secondary School. That is a Harambee school, a poor school. It was one block of, roughly constructed building with 3 partitions. From my seat in Form 1, I could hear all the lessons. Up to Form 4. So in a way, I got 4 for the price of 1. So the kids were so poor, some of them used to walk or run 15, 20 kilometers to school every morning to get this version of education. We were at the bottom of the academic system. Actually, we were outside the academic system. We were just a little above a village polytechnic. It was really bad. It was really bad. Now, those Aberdare winters were really cold, and we used to wear sweaters 24/7. Some of you who come from that part of the country know that you wear sweaters 24/7. Even babies have sweaters on their heads. From when they're born to when they become adults, you don't remove the sweater. And, sometimes you'll get even mild frostbite. It was that cold. It was that cold. So, because of that, we didn't like bathing, We didn't take showers much. And so the teachers devised a way of doing inspection parades once in a while. So they would check our fingers, our toes, whatever it is. I remember this day when an inspection parade was called, and we were told to remove our sweaters. So people removed their sweaters. And then there's this one boy. I don't know whether it was Gidua or Merie. I don't remember his name. But he refused to remove his sweater. Now it was becoming a wrestling match with the teacher. Eventually, he removed the sweater, and we saw that he had no shirt underneath. This boy was so poor, he had just sewn a collar of a shirt on the sweater. And the other kids burst into laughter. But I didn't see the joke. This is what poverty does to you, It makes you beat the system by sewing just a collar, So from that time, I've always been grateful for being able to have a shirt. Of course, my son doesn't understand that kind of perspective. So what happened in Olkalau is that the kids learned to work at a very early age. I remember Crispin, who used to work at the local quarry. So after school at 4 p.m., he would rush home, take his sledgehammers, and go and work at the quarry. And that's how he paid his school fees. I remember Maina, who used to accompany his father. And the father used to empty night soil from the railway housing quarters. For you who don't understand night soil, let me explain what it is. So you had this little toilet with a hole at the back. So Maina's dad would come with a bucket, and he will put that bucket through that hole. So whoever goes inside the toilet finds a bucket, and you do your business into the bucket. And then Maina's dad would come and empty it twice a day. So I went on a round one morning with Maina when he told me this exciting story. Kids share the most amazing stories. And I thought it was cool. But the truth is it was not. It was not. And I just saw how dehumanizing it is for human beings not to have choices, not to have education. So I made up my mind that I did not like this version of work, and that I had to work very hard to escape this version of life. And the thing that really triggered my escape from Olkalau Secondary School is that one day I heard teacher Wairimo telling the Form 2 class about some improbable story. Remember, I could hear. I could follow the classes, actually. So she was in Form 3, and she was telling these guys a story of how an Indian water buffalo is a domesticated African buffalo. This is a big lie. It's like an alternative fact, right? It was really bad. So that evening, I went back to my dad, and I said, look, I want to leave that school. I'm not going to grow. My life is gone. I know I failed, but there must be something you can do. So my dad talked to the teacher of the better school. There was a better school nearby. And the guy says, look, young man, let's have a deal. If you are top of your class end of this year, I'll take you in. That was a real school with the laboratories and many buildings. And kids who showered. So I asked him, sir, what do you mean by being top of my class? He said, any position between 1 and 10. That's how you deal with really slow people. When top of the class is 1 to 10. Just give them a target they cannot achieve. Anyway, at the end of that year, I was position 5. And just like that, I re-entered the education system. Now, what I have not told you is that this is not the first time I failed. Failure doesn't come suddenly. And this is not the first time my dad rescued me. I remember this one time when I left home in the morning, I was in primary school. I left home very early in the morning as a class 7 pupil. And I came back in the evening as a class 6 pupil. All to the shock of my mother. She nearly died. You know, we had this class 7 maths teacher. And he used to wear tight jeans and police boots, and he definitely smoked something. He would burst through the door carrying a big cane in his hand. He's saying, I have a number X, and he will pace up and down the class. Multiply by 11.5 to subtract 4 minus 14, what? And then he will stop where the sentence stops. And it will be on top of a child. And he will say, give me the answer, I'm killing you today. So, for some reason, he stopped at my place a lot. And I was caned a lot. I did not like school. So on this particular day, the ritual began the way it normally did, and it ended the way it normally did, in tears, but I could not take it anymore. I stood up, I rushed out of the door, I stumbled out, and I cried. I wailed like somebody had died. I wailed loudly. And I ran and I walked all the way back to class 6. Nobody told me to go. I just went. So I walked through the doors of class 6, and there was an English lesson in progress. And remember, I'm crying loudly. I saw an empty seat at the back, and I went and sat. The teacher did not ask me who I was. He did not ask me where I was going or why I was crying. The lesson continued as if nothing was happening. I'm happy to report that English became my best subject. So, when I went home that evening, and Dad heard the story, if he was shocked, he did not show it. He said, my son, you know, never be afraid to take a step back. When things become difficult, just take a step back. And just stay standing. Don't fall. Anyway, going back to Okeyo Secondary, I went to this better school. And for my O-levels, I sat the O-level exams, and I got a Division 1. And this was really, really exciting. I was finally on my way to a high school, a national school of my choice, for sure. I waited for the letter, and it did not come. We celebrated, but there was no calling letter. Not to a national school, not to a village school, not to a district school. Apparently that year, the Ministry of Education had enacted something called the 85% rule. It meant that 85% of all the kids who sat for exams that year could only go to schools in their home district. And I wasn't studying in my home district where I was born, so the system cut me off. It was very painful. You see, I'd left this small town with a small town mentality to go to a big town and conquer the world. Now I was out, and I considered myself to be in the diaspora. And some smart guy decided that I needed to go back. I was not going to have it. And I paid for not obeying. And that's when my dad's love came to my rescue again. Dad took time off work and we traveled all over the country looking for a good school. We knocked many offices, the doors of many offices, headmasters, district education officers, provincial, national, to no avail, nothing happened. After 2 weeks, my dad's leave was up, so he went back to work, and I continued soldiering alone, a 16-year-old boy, tamarking for a place he had already earned. It was a great tragedy. Anyway, it took me 3 months. I could tell you the story of what happened, but that's a story for another day. After 3 months, I got a place, and I went to high school. I got a place on the same day that the schools were breaking for the April holidays. All the guys who had performed less than me had been in school for 3 months. Okay, so now my dad said, remember, what happens is not whether you start first or second or third, you know? You just start. Wherever you start from, you can still win. Just keep going. So his words kept me going again and again and again. Now, you need to understand who my father was and how he gained perspective. My father's dad, my grandfather, was a colonial-era supervisor in a tea plantation. They used to call them nyaparas. So my grandfather was strong, domineering, and illiterate. You know, in those days, if you are a clerk, you would walk with a pen in your shirt pocket. He walked with a whip. And you can imagine what the whip was for. These attributes of his were very important in ensuring that the natives toed the line and that they worked for nothing. Of course, such a man does not grow spiritually. Yeah? He diminishes and dehumanizes the others, and he in turn becomes dehumanized, which is what happened. The story goes that he chased away his family and made them destitute. So my grandmother took her kids back to the village. They had no land because the guy said they could not stay on his land, and the clan gave her land. So how was she to survive? She started making alcohol for sale. The 3 girls were taken off school to be married off later to older men. But my father escaped and he went to a mission school. He never came back home for holidays because school offered him an opportunity to escape. And it gave him hope. And over the holidays, he used to work on people's farms or sell books on the streets. That's how he gained perspective. Many years later, about 50 years later, my grandfather came back, and my dad hoped that there would be a chance for a reunion, that people would engage and forgive one another. But that was not to be. The opportunity for reconciliation was lost. And people continued living apart. There was a lot of bitterness. All my dad's life, he had wanted his father to be there, especially when he encountered difficult times, when he stared failure in the face. And his dad was never there. Anyway, he made up his mind that he would love his family and he would be dutiful to everyone. And everyone. I remember that he educated all his sister's children, and they were eternally ungrateful. So, Dad did his part. So, every month, nowadays, I visit Dad, and I talk about all the victories we had and all the difficulties and challenges we faced. And there's a lot of laughter and tears of joy. And at my age, I'm not afraid to cry because I normally visit his grave alone. So, my friends, my dad was with me all the time. In all my challenges, my difficulties, and my victories. Maybe he was not there in spirit, but he was always there. He carried me. And I'm grateful for that. And I see that today. I see that today. I see that today. My friends, I'd like to tell you that love is about a father who gave his son the education he could not afford. A father who carried his son in failure and cured him of failure. Love, my friends, is making good parents of your children. Thank you.